Every Tuesday at exactly 11:30 a.m., Mr. Harold Jennings walked into Miller's Diner, a modest little cafe tucked away near a quiet highway in Georgia. He always sat at the corner booth by the window, the one with the faded leather seat in view of the flagpole outside. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another old man, weathered jeans, flannel shirt, and a veteran ball cap that had seen better days. Harold was 78. His steps were slow, his shoulders slightly slumped, but his eyes remained sharp, observant, calm, and kind. He'd been coming here for years, always ordering the same thing: black coffee, grilled cheese, and a bowl of clam chowder. Today was no different. The waitress, a new girl in her early 20s named Brittany, approached his table without looking up from her phone. She scribbled his order down half-heartedly and walked away before he could even thank her. But Harold didn't mind. He never caused trouble. He just liked his routine. When the meal ended, he reached into his wallet and gently pulled out a laminated veteran discount card. He placed it on top of the bill, as he had done hundreds of times before. This time, however, Brittany saw the card and let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Seriously?" she said loudly, holding up the card for her coworkers to see. "You're still trying to save 10% with this thing? That's kind of pathetic, don't you think?" The laughter from behind the counter was quiet, but it was there. A few customers turned their heads. One couple exchanged awkward glances. No one said anything. Harold didn't react. He simply looked down at his hands, then reached into his wallet again and paid the full amount. No discount. He stood up slowly, nodded politely to Brittany, and made his way to the door. As the bell above the door jingled and he stepped outside into the warm sunlight, not a single person in the diner realized who he truly was or what was about to happen. Outside the diner, Harold Jennings stood for a moment, his hand resting lightly on the brim of his cap as he looked back through the window. Inside, Brittany was still chuckling with her coworkers, waving the veteran card like it was some kind of joke. He didn't frown. He didn't shake his head. He just watched, quietly. Then, with the same measured pace, he walked to the end of the street and disappeared around the corner. Back inside, life went on. The waitstaff gossiped about tips and weekend plans. Brittany, feeling proud of herself, mimicked Harold's soft voice in the way he had handed over the card. "Some people really think they deserve special treatment just because they served," she scoffed. An older man at a nearby table paused mid-bite. He looked up slowly, narrowing his eyes at the group. He didn't say a word, just observed. His gaze lingered on Brittany, long enough to make her shift in place. But then he returned to his food. No one else in the diner knew who Harold Jennings really was. They didn't know about the 3 tours he served in Vietnam or the medal buried in a shoebox under his bed. They didn't know that he had led soldiers through jungle nights and brought them home when no one else could, or that his wife had died 7 years ago, and that coming to Miller's Diner every Tuesday was one of the few things that gave him comfort. They didn't know that Harold had never once asked to be honored. All he ever wanted was a quiet meal and the respect he had earned silently. But what Brittany didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Harold had never been alone. And this time, someone else had seen everything. Across the street, parked in a dusty black sedan, Sergeant Luis Morales had been watching. He was a former recruit of Harold's, now a platoon leader stationed nearby. He had just stopped by for lunch, but what he witnessed changed his plans. He pulled out his phone and sent one single message. He was laughed at, publicly. The diner, today, full formation. Tomorrow. He didn't need to say more. Within minutes, that message had spread through a private chat group, Echo Company alumni. And by morning, no one in that little town would be laughing anymore. The next day, just before noon, Miller's Diner buzzed with its usual midweek crowd, construction workers grabbing lunch, retirees sipping coffee, young couples sharing booths. Brittany, once again on the floor, seemed in high spirits, joking with customers as if nothing had happened. The bell above the door rang as a customer entered, but this time it wasn't one person. It was 12 men walking in a tight, solemn formation, each one dressed in full military uniform. Silence fell almost instantly. The air shifted, forks froze midair, conversations died mid-sentence. Their boots hit the tiled floor in perfect unison. Step, step, step. Behind them came more. Then 20 more men and women in uniform. Some younger, some older, some with medals on their chest, others with ribbons and service patches from places most Americans would never visit. By the time the last soldier entered, the diner was packed shoulder to shoulder with nearly 50 uniformed service members. The customers turned in their seats. Some stood. Some removed their hats. Others just stared in disbelief. At the front of the formation, Sergeant Luis Morales stepped forward. He scanned the room and finally spoke in a voice that was calm, deep, and commanding. "We're here to have lunch with Colonel Harold Jennings." Gasps rippled through the diner. From the sidewalk, Harold stepped in, dressed in a pressed jacket, his cap in hand, his medals displayed modestly but clearly. The battalion snapped to attention. Then, in perfect silence, they all saluted. It wasn't performative. It wasn't theatrical. It was military respect, pure and unwavering. Brittany dropped the pen in her hand. Her face paled. She looked like a child who had just realized she insulted a king in his own court. Harold said nothing. He didn't need to. Morales stepped aside and pulled out a chair. "Sir," he said, "your table awaits." The rest of the battalion moved into position. Some took seats at nearby booths. Others stood guard at the edges of the room. No one asked for a menu. No one placed an order. They were here for one reason only: to remind everyone what honor looks like when it's earned. Customers began to applaud, slow at first, then rising like a wave. Some stood. A few had tears in their eyes. And Brittany? She stood frozen, her lip trembling, as the man she had mocked the day before quietly took his seat and nodded to her. Not with anger, but with dignity, a dignity she couldn't begin to comprehend. The energy inside Miller's diner was completely different now. What had once been just a typical lunch crowd had turned into something else, a moment of reckoning. The battalion didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. Harold Jennings sat calmly, sipping coffee poured by one of the soldiers who now stood behind him like an honor guard. The diner's owner, Mr. Dale, had rushed in minutes earlier after getting frantic calls from his staff. He stepped behind the counter, confused and out of breath. "What's going on?" he whispered to Brittany. But it only took a second for him to see Harold at the center table, surrounded by the most decorated group of people ever to step foot in his little establishment. And then he saw Brittany, frozen, pale, and staring blankly. The pieces clicked. Dale walked over, removed his cap respectfully, and approached Harold. "Colonel, sir, I had no idea," he said softly. "Please allow us to cover your meal and the meals of every man and woman here. It's the least we can do." Harold looked up, nodded kindly. "Thank you, Dale. But we didn't come for free food. We came to teach a lesson, one that's long overdue." He glanced just for a moment toward Brittany. She was standing behind the counter, her hands shaking, her eyes red with tears. She wasn't laughing now. Moments later, she stepped out from behind the counter and slowly walked over to Harold's table. The room grew quiet again. She stood in front of him, looking 10 years younger than she had the day before, like a child facing a parent after doing something deeply wrong. "Sir," she whispered, voice trembling, "I didn't know. I was rude. I was wrong. I'm so sorry." Harold didn't berate her. He didn't humiliate her. He just looked her in the eyes and said, "Respect doesn't cost anything. But once lost, it's hard to earn back." Brittany's lips quivered. She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. And then Harold did something no one expected. He stood, slowly, and extended his hand. "Learn from it," he said gently. She took his hand with both of hers. That one small gesture was heavier than 1,000 lectures. The entire room remained silent, watching, learning. The battalion remained standing, unmoving. They were witnesses, not just to the mistake, but to the forgiveness. After the handshake, Brittany stepped back, wiping her eyes. She didn't return behind the counter. Instead, she quietly walked to a table in the corner and sat down, staring at her hands, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. The soldiers around the room began to relax, the formal energy softening. Some sat, others shared warm looks with the townsfolk. It wasn't about anger, it was about presence, about reminder, about dignity. Harold Jennings sat once more, this time surrounded by those who truly understood the cost of the peace others so easily take for granted. He didn't gloat, he didn't smile smugly. He simply lifted his coffee cup and took a long, slow sip. The entire diner seemed to breathe differently after that. Conversations resumed, but now with reverence. A child at a nearby table asked his father, "Was he in a real war?" The father nodded slowly, eyes still on Harold. "He was the kind of man who made it home so we could be here today." Before the battalion left, Sergeant Morales pinned a small note on the bulletin board near the entrance. It read, "Respect all who serve. You never know who's sitting across from you." Later that afternoon, the diner changed its signage. Right under the name Miller's Diner, a new line was painted in gold. "Veterans always welcome, with honor." And Brittany, she didn't quit. She didn't run. She stayed. And with time, she changed. She learned every story behind every discount card that came through her hands from that day on. She became, in some quiet way, a protector of the memory she once mocked. If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to have you with us. Each day, we share quiet moments that remind us what still matters. You can subscribe below to join us.